that we love Him. Open our arms, Lord, and help us to listen. Open our eyes, Lord. We want to see Jesus. Please be seated. John chapter 20. You have your Bible. John chapter 20. Excuse me. Beginning in verse 24 and reading through the end of the chapter. But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples, therefore, were saying to him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see in his hands the imprint of the nails, and put my finger into the place of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." And after 8 days again his disciples were inside, and Thomas with them. And Jesus came to the doors, having been shut, and stood there in their midst, and said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, "Reach here with your finger, and see my hands. Reach here with your hand, and put it into my side. And be not unbelieving, but believing." Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, have you believed? Blessed are they who did not see and yet believe." After the excitement of 2 Sabbaths, back to back, without any feedback, after the disappointment of having the teacher, the rabbi hanging on a cross, after the shock of everything, it was all too much. All of this was way too familiar. And yet, way too strange. And now, 8 days had passed, 8 more days had passed, and there were those who said that they had seen them. And Thomas came in and he said, "That and $1.95 will buy me a cup of coffee at Wawa." Sacrilege, I know. Sorry, sacrilege, I know. That and $1.95. You know, that's what I say to my kids when they come to me with some of these ridiculous stories that they have. That and $1.95, buy me a cup of coffee at Wawa. Come on, let's go. Move on. Next thing. Why would I believe that? Show me those hands. Show me those feet. Show me those sides. Because all my life in Jerusalem, I have seen the Messiahs come, the Messiahs go. I've seen them on the cross, and the next thing I know, when I turn around, their disciples have dispersed, they're gone away, there's nothing. And this has happened way too many times historically. And if you still don't believe what I'm saying, I invite you again to read Josephus, because he details it. Coming and going over and over and over. How much can you actually believe if you have heard in the synagogue, in the temple, that the Messiah is coming, and they put these people out there, and they come in with these great ideas of how we're going to deliver Jerusalem militarily. I think I said it right finally. Militarily. And yet they come out and they're on the cross and they're dead and everybody leaves and it's gone and it's over with. And now we have this guy, and he's coming in here, and all he talks about is peace and love and joy and whatever else, and he never ever raises a sword, a bow and arrow, whatever, an axe, nothing. He doesn't do it. And he tells us not to do it. And what happened up in the Garden of Gethsemane when Peter took the sword and he cut off the guards here? What happened? He put it back on. He healed the guy. He healed the guy. And I stood there in the garden with all of y'all and saw them take him away. And I may not have been at the foot of that cross, but I saw him on that cross. And they didn't tie his hands up this time. They put nails in him and tied him up there. So, you and your stories and $1.95 will buy me a cup of coffee at Wawa. I don't know what the equivalent of that would have been in Jerusalem. They obviously didn't have a Wawa. That and a farthing. That and a shekel. Whatever it was. Why should I believe you? Okay. So now, some blunt questions to think about. I warned a couple people today. I warned a couple of y'all. The rest of you just get the shock, okay? Because here it comes. What do you honestly think when someone tells you they saw a miracle? No judgment. And I'm not asking you to reply to me today because I want you to use your head. What do you honestly think when somebody comes up to you and says, I saw a miracle? I saw somebody dead and now they're alive. I saw somebody fall out of the third floor of a window and they didn't get hurt. I saw somebody get hit by a car and they ended up in the hospital and they should have died and they didn't. I saw that accident. Many of us, when we hear that, if we're honest, many of us think that and $1.95 will buy me a cup of coffee at Wawa. Obviously, there was something else going on. Somebody comes to you and says, pray for my healing. I would imagine that in this group that's sitting here today, the majority of us go home and we earnestly pray. We earnestly pray. But kind of like the disciples when they were with Jesus, how much of that do we really think is going to happen? How much of that do we really put our faith in the miracle and the fact that God is going to deliver that person, that health, back to that person? Now some of us have actually gone through the miracle and we know what it is. But even then sometimes we turn around and we go, that is so incredibly hard to believe. Back in the, I had to adjust my thought pattern here. Back in the late 70s, I had some friends up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I used to drive up there in some really interesting weather. Like one time I was driving my Fiat along and I was watching the taillights of the Greyhound bus in front of me because it was snowing so hard in northern Minnesota I couldn't see anything else except for that little red ball. And it kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and I finally pulled off. And one at this particular time while I was up there with this group of people, they were charismatic, faithfully charismatic. But the interesting thing about it was that one day I was sitting with the leader because he knew I was a seminarian. We were sitting together, and he says, you know, sometimes I've figured out how to get the leg to grow. He says, if you readjust the hip, you have both legs the same length, and they can walk that way for a little while, but eventually it goes back. And I'm going, uh-huh. Isn't that trickery? And then I sat in the car with a couple of people one night, and they told me that if I didn't speak in tongues, I was not saved. And I'm going, you do not know. You do not know me. How can you tell me that? Well, the Bible says it. Okay. And besides that, we know you can be healed. Okay, y'all watched me come up here today, right? I know Jesus Christ. I know Jesus Christ. I know that Jesus Christ heals people. I know that Jesus Christ heals people. I know there are people in this congregation that have been healed. Sometimes God has a plan. Oops. All the time, God has a plan. Sometimes God's plan is not my plan. Now, I personally, my wife too, I think some days we really do wish that God would deal with this, because it would make both of our lives so much easier. So, are you willing, I said all of that to ask this next question, are you willing to put your integrity on the line and tell another person that they are healed? Don't answer that to me. Immediately after telling his disciples that the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few, Jesus told his disciples that they had the power to heal. Turn to Matthew chapter 10. Verse yes, chapter 10, verse, I'm going to begin in verse 5 and read through verse 10. All right? These 12 Jesus sent out after instructing them, saying, do not go in the way of the Gentiles, and do not enter any city of the Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Verse 8. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the leper, cast out the demon. Freely you received, freely give. Do not acquire gold or silver or copper for your money belts, or a bag for your journey, or even 2 tunics or sandals or a staff, for the worker is worthy of his support. Now, next, I want you to turn over to Luke chapter 10. I'm in Luke. No, I'm at 15. Chapter 10. verses 1 through 3. And after this, the Lord appointed 70 others. And he sent them out 2 by 2 and 2 ahead of him to every city and place where he himself was going. And he was saying to them, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore beseech the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Go your ways, behold, I send you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. I think it's interesting. First you have the 12, and then you have the 70. And how many people were standing at the foot of the cross that also went to the opening of the grave and were standing at the opening of the grave when he came out? Was there anybody standing at the opening of the grave when he came out? How many of the 7, no, let's forget the 70. How many of the 12, actually believed that he would rise again? Been here for the last 2 weeks, you know. If you haven't been, I'm telling you now. Weren't many. In reality, there wasn't anybody that really believed that. $1.95 will buy me a cup of coffee at Wawa. Why? Well, we look at history and we say, historically, it never happened before. Well, it only needed to happen once. It only needed to happen once because there is only one Messiah.
Amen.
And all the others, as Jesus said throughout Matthew, throughout Luke, throughout Mark. Forgot Mark. Throughout Matthew, throughout Mark, throughout Luke, he kept telling his disciples, there are many others, but they're imposters. They're imposters. And Jesus appointed 70, and he knew Jesus was holy God and holy man. Jesus knew that they were not going to be there when he came out. But he also knew that if he didn't do what he needed to do, they wouldn't be there when he did show himself. And he knew that Thomas was there, and he knew that Judas was there, and he knew that Peter was there, and he knew what all of them were going to do. So where does your strength come from? Are we more respectful of God or afraid of man? Those of us that are sitting here this morning, are we more respectful of God or afraid of man? I came up with the first name. Pastor of Coral Gables Presbyterian Church. Coral Grove. Anyway, came up with his first name. His first name was James. Especially today, there's a point in this, especially today with the attitudes that there are towards the church. What does it take to go in to the public and put God first? Now again, I'm telling you, this is not judgment. This is what we are all supposed to be doing. All of us, including the guy that's standing up in front of you and telling you that you're supposed to be doing this now. Okay? Because where Pastor James comes from is that back in the 70s and 80s when I was in college and doing all my silliness things that I don't do anymore. Excuse me, that I don't do anymore. Back in those days, you know, we used to have spring break. And the spring break, we would go to Daytona Beach. And we went to Daytona Beach. The thing was that those of us who were up and coming seminarians, we were supposed to go out on the beach, and we were supposed to walk up to our colleagues, our friends, our other college students from all across the country and sometimes around the world, and say to them, hey, if you die tomorrow, where are you going to be? Do you remember that? Okay. And as I was explaining to the ones that were here before the service, you know, some of us, it's really hard for us to go out and to present our testimony to people that we don't know on the street. It's a little bit easier during spring break when all the nuts are out there, and so all the other nuts that are doing the nutty things can go out and talk to them and say, hey, if you're going to die tomorrow, where are you going to be? Because they're doing weird things like that too, okay? It's a little bit easier. But the first time I did it, it was like, do I really want to do that? And it was kind of safe back then. Our colleagues didn't carry guns in their swimsuits. Or knives, or whatever it is. You know, it was a little bit safer world back then, so you didn't really have to worry about it. The worst that could happen to you is that they go, oh, one of those Jesus freaks, and walk off. How much harder is it to do? In the 50s, in the 60s, everybody went to church, or at least said that they went to church. Right? You know, back then, if you didn't belong to a church, you were a sinner and you were going to hell tomorrow. Remember those days? Some of us? Okay? So you could actually say some things that it's harder today. It's really harder today to go out and to say to somebody, do you know Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? Because today you can get in serious trouble for that. Right? So where does your strength come from? Where were we when Jesus was not with us? What happens when we are suffering from disappointment, disillusionment? Oh, you know, God, I've trusted you all my life. You've always been there for me. You've always done with me. You've always taken care of me. Even when I walked away and I was being stupid, you were there. And now where are you? I don't see you on the street anymore. I don't see you in the classroom. Where are you? You told us to go out and to heal. You told the 70 to look at the multitudes. And it's just too hard. And do you really exist? See, Jesus broke the spell with Thomas. He put his finger in his hand, he put his hand in his side, and Jesus told him, do not be unbelieving, but believing. Those of us who are here today, as I look around, those of us who are here today are here because we have had an experience with the mighty God. Somehow He has touched our lives. Somehow He has told us that He is there. And for us to stand there and say, that and $1.95 will buy me a cup of coffee. Well, I'm sure you're sick of that one by now. Okay? But you got the point. Because that's kind of what we do. And I'm not telling you, I will not tell you that it is easier for me than it is for you. Or that it is easier for you than it is for me. You know, there are times when I know there's somebody I was supposed to talk to, and I said, I wonder if I stall long enough, if I can get beyond it. I know none of you do that. You're all better. What does it take you to believe enough to claim him? Because unless it is a deathbed confession, there are signs in our lives that attest to our belief. There are signs that we need to confess before men. Still got Matthew 10 open. Look at verse 32. Actually, look at verse 30, starting in verse 30 and ending in 33. But the very hairs on your head are numbered. Therefore, do not fear. You are of more value than the sparrows. I purposely left the beginning part off of that, because that has a different purpose than what we're looking at right now. The very hairs on your head are numbered, therefore do not fear, you are of more value than the sparrows. Everyone, therefore, who shall confess me before men, I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven. And whoever shall deny me before men, I will also deny him before my Father who is in heaven. That denial, by the way, is an outright denial. When you actually tell somebody, I never knew him. I do not know who you're talking about. That's an outright denial. It's not the same as saying, I wonder if I can outlast God. God knows we're going to do that. I didn't say he justified it. I didn't say you can justify it. I can say he knows. And if you don't witness to somebody that God wants you to witness to, guess what? He will find somebody else. Yeah? It might be my crazy brother-in-law Ray. And he would know that I'm picking on him. And he would expect me to pick on him. Might be my crazy brother-in-law Ray, but you know what? He still expects us to stand before him and to say, we know God is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by him. So, regardless of the ridicule we take, regardless of the trouble it is for us, regardless of the way we feel in our hearts and in our souls, and we all feel this way, regardless of that, he has called us to witness. Sometimes that witnessing is in different ways. Very few of us are street corner preachers. One more story. One more story. I'm going to get in trouble for this one, but I'm going to do it anyway. Last night, 9 o'clock at night. 9 o'clock at night. It wasn't ding dong. We got a doorbell. It was. And I went upstairs because Aunt Lorena was kind of scared. You know, she'd been downstairs. She ran back upstairs. She came back, and she's kind of like, I don't want to deal with this. People don't knock on my door at 9 o'clock at night. That's why I live up here on this hill. So I went and I looked out the peephole, and there's these two girls standing on the stoop. And I kind of look at them. They look kind of harmless. So I opened the door. And they have tags on their shirts. 9 o'clock at night. You got to remember, 9 o'clock at night. And they're there, and they said, hi, we are, I don't remember their names, of Jesus Christ, of the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. And I looked at him like, okay. Now, I would venture to say that most of us sitting here are not going to go around and knock on somebody's door at 9 o'clock in the morning, let alone at 9 o'clock at night. 11 o'clock in the morning, let alone 9 o'clock at night. Okay? And this is not a sermon about Jesus Christ. The Church of Latter-day Saints, it all of a sudden went out of my head. It's not a sermon about that. Not picking them up over us. The point is that there are people that go out and knock on doors and talk to people. I can't do that. Sorry, I can't. I can't stand on the street corner and preach. But I can have a, what did we have 3 weeks ago?
Meet and greet.
A meet and greet. I can have a meet and greet. I invite people over. Maybe nobody will come. Maybe one person will come. Who knows? But whatever God, and I'm not, and this again, it's no judgment because not all of us could be there, and so it's not a judgment thing. It's a thing of you have to open your mind and your heart and know what God is telling you. And if God tells you to go talk to your boss about Jesus Christ, if he's seriously telling you, go talk to your boss about Jesus Christ, you better go do it. If he's not telling you that, I wouldn't advise it. But, you know, God has a way of telling us what he wants us to do, when he wants us to do it. And it doesn't matter that our attitude is that I've seen it and I've seen it and I've seen it, and nothing happens. You don't know what happens. God works here. We work here. Okay? God's not, I really don't think that God is going to tell you to do something outlandish that is going to get you in serious trouble unless he has already told you that you are a martyr. I haven't had one single person come up to me from this congregation and hear that God has called you to be a martyr. And I think you would if you really did it. My point is, what God tells you, what God tells me, we have to listen. And we have to be ready to respond. And whether we believe that God is going to work a miracle or not, if somebody in this congregation, this is the easy part, if somebody in this congregation tells us we need to pray for them, we need to pray for them. Okay? If somebody tells us that we need to talk to somebody, and we have the support of God to do it, we need to do it. And we need not be second guessing ourselves because we forgot where we started. Number 409. We're going to stand together and sing, I Know Whom I Have Believed. Number 409. Is that the correct one, Sherry?
Yes.
for his own. But I know I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day. I know not how this saving faith to me he did impart, nor how believing in his word wrought peace within my heart. But I know I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. I know not how the Spirit moves, convincing men of sin, revealing Jesus through the Word, creating faith in him. But I know I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. I know not when my Lord may come at night or noonday fair, nor if I walk the vale with him or meet him in the air. But I know I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day.
Please be seated for the postlude. Therefore he is also
Therefore he is able also to save forever those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. For it was fitting for us to have such a high priest, holy, innocent, undefiled, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. Amen.